bag. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself as you listen to this. Have you ever started off the year feeling genuinely hopeful? Like this time things might really be different, only to feel that familiar heaviness creep in a few weeks later. Maybe you set the goal to hit the gym, get fit, but those gym visits slowly slow down. Maybe you set the goal to journal every morning, but 3 weeks later that journal stays unopened. The good intentions quietly drift into the background because life gets busy. Somewhere along the way, the story in your head shifts from "I'm doing this" and "I've got this" to "here we go again." If that sounds familiar, you're not broken, you're not lazy, and you are definitely not lacking in discipline. What you're experiencing is something deeply human, and it's actually why so many New Year's goals fail, even when they are set with the very best intentions. If you've been a regular listener, you'll remember that in a previous edition of the Happiness Hack, we talked about why motivation fades, but meaning helps things endure. And today we're going to directly build on that idea. Because while meaning gives us direction, it's the small wins that keep us moving when the motivation inevitably dips. Tiny, consistent actions are not watered-down versions of change. They're exactly how real, lasting change happens. Today we're going to be talking about the psychology behind small wins, and it might just be the missing piece you've been overlooking. You're listening to The Happiness Hack with Tim Coulson, the podcast where we take a little bit of positive psychology, some strength-based healing, and then mix it all together to come up with real-world applications on how we can live with more purpose, more clarity, and most importantly, more happiness. And today, we're talking about a really relevant topic that is about that time of year where all of us start thinking of our New Year's goals. Now, it's a tradition to set resolutions at the start of every year, but most New Year's goals fail, and it's for one simple reason. They ask too much too soon from a system that hasn't yet changed. At the start of the year, our motivation is high, dopamine is flowing, and everything feels possible. We imagine a future version of ourselves who wakes up earlier, eats better, exercises more consistently, manages to stress beautifully, and somehow this version of us does all of it without ever being tired, overwhelmed, or distracted. It's simply not feasible. The problem is not the goal itself. The problem is the gap between our intention and our capacity. When goals are too big, too vague, or too disconnected from our daily life, they rely almost entirely on motivation to sustain them. And by now we know that motivation, at its very nature, is unreliable. It fluctuates with sleep, stress, mood, workload, and life events. When motivation drops, so often the behavior drops with it, and that's where self-criticism rushes in to fill the gap. This is where people start to lose trust in themselves, not because they can't change, but because the way they've been trying to change is unsustainable. So this is where an old business trick called SMART goals comes in, and it's genuinely helpful for personal development. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound or timely. Now, this framework is often talked about in the workplace, and it is a business model, but it is so incredibly useful for personal change when we pair it with self-compassion and realism. So let's take a common New Year goal. I want to get healthier this year. It sounds super positive, and it sounds like something we could achieve, but it's not specific, it's not measurable, and it doesn't tell our brain what to do on a random Tuesday when we're tired and busy. A SMART version of this goal might sound something like this. For the next 4 weeks, I will go for a 10-minute walk after dinner a minimum of 3 times a week. This goal is small, it's clear, and most importantly, it's achievable and time-bound, fits into real life, rather than competing with it or adding more to our already overwhelmed plates. Smart goals work best when they support these small wins, not when they are used to justify unrealistic expectations. A smart goal gives your nervous system the clarity instead of the pressure to do things. And clarity is far more motivating over time than the intensity to do everything all at once. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to use our SMART goals and couple them with the power of small wins. Small wins work psychologically because they change how our brain experiences progress. Every time you follow through on a small and achievable action, your brain receives a signal that says, I've achieved it, I've completed something, I can trust myself. This signal builds confidence, not in an abstract way, but in a literal, lived, embodied way. Small wins do not rely on hype or willpower. They simply rely on consistency, and consistency creates the identity change. So instead of trying to become a motivated person, you incrementally, slowly become someone who shows up and completes things, even imperfectly. That identity shift matters far more than any single outcome. This is where small wins are quietly reinforcing our meaning. Because when that motivation fades, meaning gives us direction, and the small wins give us momentum to continue. They keep us moving forward even when that initial excitement is gone. Tiny habits work even when the big goals may not. Tiny habits work because they respect how humans actually function. Our brain is wired for safety and efficiency. When a habit feels too demanding, our system interprets it as a threat, not a challenge. Small habits, on the other hand, they feel safe enough to repeat, and repetition is what matters most. Not the intensity of it, and certainly not doing it perfectly. Each repetition strengthens our neural pathways. Over time, these pathways become the default option, and they become easier for us to access. So small habits eventually feel automatic, while big, dramatic changes often collapse under the pressure of their own weight. Small wins reduce this emotional friction on us. They lower the cost of starting, and starting is often the hardest part. So, here's what I want you to do, guys. Take your goals and look at them and really analyze them. How can you make them smaller? How can you make them smarter, more specific, more measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound? And if you're struggling to think of a SMART goal, I've put together a goal-setting workbook designed exactly for you. It's free to download on my website, and it takes you through how to create a goal that is not only smart, but deeply meaningful. Then it takes it further and shows you how you can pair this goal into an already existing routine so that it creates a sustainable habit. Because this is what we know. When motivation fades, it's creating that meaning that helps things to endure. Motivation is emotional. Meaning is directional. So small wins are the bridge between the two. When your motivation is high, these small, simple goals feel easy. In fact, if they feel super easy, you're on the right path. Because when motivation is low, small wins keep you connected to your values. They keep you moving forward without overwhelming you. So this is where the most effective goals become process-focused, not outcome-focused. They are not about becoming someone else overnight. They are about behaving in ways that align with who you want to be, one small action at a time. Where meaning answers the question, why does this matter? Creating a goal based on small wins answers the question, what can I do today that matters? And you need both. Now that I've talked about it, how are we going to design our own small wins? Well, start by asking yourself one simple question. What is the habit that I want to create? And what is the smallest version of this habit that I could realistically do on my worst day? This is the very essence of strength-based healing. We take what we already have access to, something that we can do without having to put major energy and motivation into it. Because when we can do it on our worst day, we can absolutely do that and more on our best day. So if the answer initially feels so simple that it's too easy, you might be on the right track here. Instead of thinking things like, I want to exercise more, let's smarten it up and tighten it down, and let's just say, I'm going to do 10 minutes of movement each day. Instead of saying things like, I want to be more mindful of my emotions. Tighten it up, smarten it down, and say, whenever I'm overwhelmed, I'm going to take one slow breath before responding. Same thing with the diet, guys. Instead of eat better, say, every morning I'm going to have a healthy breakfast. These actions are not meaningless. They are foundational, because once a habit exists, then it can grow. But it can never grow if it doesn't take root. Small wins build your self-efficacy because they provide repeated evidence that your actions matter. Remember, self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to influence your own life. It is the one strongest predictor of resilience, well-being, and long-term happiness. Each time we achieve a small goal, each time we follow through with our commitments, it strengthens that belief that we can cope, adapt, and keep going. It makes our self-efficacy bloom. This is especially important if you've ever experienced repeated setbacks or disappointment with your past goals. Small wins help you to rebuild trust in yourself gently, without shame. So if you're listening to this just as you're about to set your New Year's resolutions, I want you to have a think. The new year does not need a reinvention of yourself. It simply needs a recalibration. So instead of asking, what should I change about myself this year? I want you to ask, what small action can help support me to become the person I want to be this year? Instead of setting goals that impress, set habits that last. Instead of relying on motivation, anchor your actions in meaning. And instead of chasing perfection, focus on progress, even when it feels slow. If you take one thing from today, let it be this. Big change is not always created by big moments. It is more often created by small, repeated actions that align with what matters most to you. Motivation will rise and fall. Life does get in the way sometimes. Some weeks, things are going to go better than others. None of that means you're failing. Small wins are not about doing more. They're about doing what matters consistently and with self-compassion. When you stack enough of these moments together, something powerful happens. Not all at once, but steadily, quietly, and sustainably, you become the person you've always wanted to be. So, that's what I've got for you today. I hope it resonates, and if it does, I would love for you to subscribe and, better yet, share this podcast with someone else who needs to hear this message. As always, if you're ready to make some real positive, sustainable change in your life, you can always book a session with me. tim-coulson.com. That's tim-coulson.com. You've been listening to The Happiness Hack with Tim Coulson. You've got this, guys. And as always, remember, the day is what you make it.